Good morning, everybody. Cha, sir. I'm taking this opportunity to introduce myself, so it is done. Thank you very much, sir. Let me to begin my presentation on post-conflict Sri Lanka from human security perspective. Before begin my presentation, I would like to bring your attention on one of saying of Albert Einstein, who summed up the discovery of the atomic energy with characteristic of simplicity. Everything changed. He went on to predict we shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive. He emphasized a need of transition in thinking from nuclear security to human security. We believe that post-conflict Sri Lanka is also requires that transition in thinking. That's the beginning of my presentation. Before going to start the discussion, I would like to move on to outline of the presentation. In the first part of the presentation, I will talk about the traditional security. Then I want to introduce the concept of human security. Thirdly, I will talk about the dimensions of human security. Then human security in post-conflict Sri Lanka. Later, I'll come up with my conclusions. In traditional sense, what is traditional security? When we talk about the traditional security, you can see in my study, I focused different features of the traditional security. As you see in this slide, it is in the sense that is nation states act as the referent objective of security. In simple sense, we can say that traditional security is something majorly focused with the state and the objective of its state, and states play the major role in the traditional security. Secondly, intention to meet the requirement of the nation state. If I explain it, traditional security focus on the state, nation states, and mostly it meets the needs and the requirements of the nation state, rather focusing on the individuals or the individual's requirement. So in my study, I highlighted that. So the traditional security, it try to meet, most of the time, I'm not saying it doesn't meet the needs of the individual, but mostly it meets the requirements of the nation itself. That's what I want to highlight. Then thirdly, let's focus on interest of individuals, of mankind as a whole. It's one kind of feature of traditional security. As human beings, we have our desires and we have our own expectations and the requirements in our day-to-day life. So basically, in my study, I highlighted that the traditional security is failed to address some individual issues, non-military issues, what the society, what the individual society requests. Thirdly, major concerns, military and the economic power. And finally, I can say less focus on ideals or the ethics. So I think within the limited time, I think I could give a picture of the traditional security. When I move on to definitions for human security, you can see that is a little bit different from the traditional security. United Nations Human Development Report, it says human security includes safety from chronic threats such as hunger, disease, and the repressions, as well as the protections from the sudden and harmful disruptions in the patterns of daily life. I think this definition is enough to understand the role of the human security, of the image of the human security that is required by the post-conflict Sri Lanka. We know that we were experiencing 30 years war, but now we have come into another context that is post-war era. So there we have to do much work with the rehabilitations and the development work in the country. I suggest in my study now thinking pattern or new approach to see the requirements of the country is needed. That's why I want to highlight the human security approach as a fresh approach to see the rehabilitation work and the development process in the Sri Lanka. In my study, I wanted to find out that how we can utilize the human security approach as a fresh approach to security, not only security, to the development process in the country. Now you can see some basic characteristics of human security. It's a universal concern. I will explain what is universal concern. It is relevant to people everywhere, rich or poor. That is the most significant feature of the human security approach. It is universal. Whether you are rich, whether you are poor, it is relevant to us. And you know, all the threats are common to human beings. Whether it's an environmental threat, whether it's a terrorist threat, it is common to everybody. Therefore, I think this concept can be utilized in the soil of our country also, as it is in the universal feature. Secondly, the components of the human security are interdependent. If we utilize the concept, we should know how should we utilize in the country with the features of the concept. What we can say here is there is a correlation among the components of the human security. It can be environmental security, food security, community security, or the personal security. I want to say that there is an interconnection, or all components are interdependent. That is what I want to highlight in my study regarding the human security. When I come on to human security, it's easier to ensure through early prevention. That is what I have to mention especially, because we should not regret later. So always human security encourage us to be prevented. It may be in the field of human rights or the conflict resolution or the prevention of conflict. So it always encouraged to be prevented rather than the later intervention. In my study, I highlighted that, and I suggest authorities and the policy makers to take this concern and to rebuild the country, and in possible way we can develop the country using the concept of human security. And you can see the last feature of the characteristic of the human security. That is, human security is people-centered. You know that the traditional security, most of the time, it addressed the military issues. But now, we are free of war, and we are experiencing the post-conflict era. Therefore, I suggest, as a concept which focus on people, people-centered, as a people-centered concept, we can take much work from the human security approach. You can see major components of the human security, that is from freedom from fear and the freedom from want. I ask you to think of these two major components of the human security. As individual, we need the freedom from fear. Everybody needs that. I think you all agree with me. Therefore, as a country which is experiencing post-war era, we have to take this concern. Let me to introduce the different dimensions of the human security. As I told you earlier, these components are interconnected. If you go for the personal security without political security, I think you won't be able to ensure the political security. If you go for the environmental security without economic security, so there will be another problem. That's why I want to highlight that most of the components are interrelated and they have correlations. Now we have come to the very important part of my presentation, that is post-conflict Sri Lanka and human security. Sri Lankan security sector has been primarily defined by the constant need to respond to violent conflict. That is before the post-conflict era. There we understood all the military operations and the security in terms of military feature. But now the time has been changed. Now we have to address the needs of the problem who are affected by the war. If not the victims of the war, they are waiting for the rehabilitations and the development process. Not in the north and the east, the whole country, it expecting the development and the benefits of the after defeating the terrorism. I think for that concept, as a junior academic, I suggest that we can utilize this kind of concept which country bring forward for the sustainable development and the prosperous. Therefore, we can say human security as an approach of defining security of post-conflict Sri Lanka. And the later, focusing on many non-military issues in the post-conflict Sri Lanka. We can say that human security approach will address most of the non-military issues in the country. It may be health sector, educational sector, if not the cultural sector, and the other personal development sector. It will be beneficial for whole country. And we can use it as a development tool. If you take the components of the economic security, it ensures that the person should have satisfactory wage for her his survival. That's very important. Not only that, the health component, it's very important to ensure the health conditions of the country, and which will be directly impact on the labor force in the country. Let me to conclude my presentation. I was talking about the human security as a fresh approach to address post-conflict Sri Lanka as a country which were affected by the terrorism before 30 years. Now we are living in different era. Therefore, I think we have to suggest new approaches and new perspectives to develop the country and sort out the problems in the country and to prevent another war in the future. Therefore, I suggest human security concept can be utilized as a peace-building tool in post-conflict Sri Lanka. Secondly, I conclude human security concept has the potential of addressing most of the non-military issues in the post-conflict Sri Lanka. Further, it can be used as a development tool of the post-conflict Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, everybody, for your cooperation.
Thank you very much, Chaminda. We will always remember you as a champion of human security. And I think the audience, especially those officers and men who fought in the front, will agree that we need more strategy of engagement today rather than a strategy of kinetic operations. That was the focus against the LTT, but today there should be a shift towards human security. Let me now thank you.